Hi, welcome everybody. There's still some people coming in, but yeah, we only have an hour today, so we will already get started. So yeah, thanks everyone so much for joining and welcome to our webinar, Climate Proofing Water and Sanitation. My name is Sarah Kalin, and I'm a program manager for Aqua for All within the West Africa program at Aqua for All, and I am leading the Scaling Climate Resilient Wash program. This webinar is aligning with the launch of our new climate resilience grants and technical assistance support that we're offering under the Scaling Climate Resilient Wash program. And so we wanted to talk a bit more about what climate resilience is and then these new products. I'm joined today by my colleague Anna Marie Mastenbroek, Technical Assistance Manager at Aqua for All, and Simon Cohen, who is a wash expert from the Aqua for All side, and Kimberly Worsham from Flush, who is our technical partner and who will introduce herself shortly. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. We do have interpretation in French, so please select the language you would like to listen to below. You can click on more and then the globe icon. I think there's also some instructions at the bottom. We also have the webinar slides translated in French, so if you're following in French, you can open that and follow along with the translations if that's easier. We would like to ask that all participants keep their cameras and microphones off for the duration of the webinar. At the end of the session, we'll have an opportunity for the Q&A, so you can write your questions in the chat, and we will answer them either in the chat during the session or in the Q&A session. And lastly, the web session is being recorded, and we're going to share the recording and the slide deck in English and in French on LinkedIn and afterwards with the registered participants. So, all of that being said, let's move on to the agenda for today. If I can, one moment. There we go, great. Yeah, so in today's session, we are going to have a high-level look at what we mean by climate resilient wash, as well as the opportunities that Aqua for All is providing for enterprises who want to better understand their own climate risks and take steps to reduce the risks and adapt to them. We're also going to provide you guidance on our climate risk assessment tool that we have, and then also give you an opportunity to ask any questions at the end. So, as an introduction, for those who don't know Aqua for All, Aqua for All is an international foundation based in the Netherlands, which focuses on market-based approaches to expand water and sanitation access in East and West Africa and South Asia. Our goal is to crowd in private capital into the wash sector and strengthen entrepreneurs through our dual approach, which are our two main impact intervention areas. The first area is market development, in which we provide a range of grant and technical assistance instruments to wash enterprises to support them to scale their services and attract private capital. And we also have a team, fund investments and structuring, in which we work with funds and financial institutions to de-risk water and sanitation portfolios and increase access to finance for wash services. In this webinar, we are going to zoom in on our climate approach specifically for our market development work. Aqua for All has developed a climate approach for our investments because, well, we see that the climate crisis is largely a water crisis because people are increasingly facing water stress and extreme weather events are further impacting water scarcity. When we work with water businesses operating in climate-stressed areas, we see two main priorities with regards to climate change. Firstly, that the communities themselves need access to wash services to increase their resilience to the effects of climate change that are happening. And secondly, that the businesses and services need to be able to continue to provide services even when climate disruptions arise. So together, we try to ensure that all of our investments are climate smart, which are reducing emissions where possible, reducing the risks for enterprises and their customers, and building resilience of the enterprises and ultimately the consumers they serve. So that's a short introduction. I'd like to now hand over to Kimberly Worsham from Flush, who's supporting Aqua for All as a technical advisor under this program.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining today. We're excited to talk about this climate risk assessment and just introducing a little bit about who Flush is. So we are a global consulting company. We focus on connecting data to real world impact through storytelling, and we do specialize in water sanitation and climate. So Aquaforall has hired us to be their technical partner on providing this climate risk assessment support with their teams and also helping their SMEs learn how to adapt and plan for climate resilience. So that's a little bit about us. Happy for you guys to put in the chat box questions. My team is here as well. I have my team Beck, Starin, and Paulson here with me, and they're happy to answer questions in the chat box. But we also want to get to know who is on this presentation listening to us on the webinar. So we have a few questions on a Mentimeter, so please feel free to take this Mentimeter link or QR code. We're waiting to see people log in. So once you log in, we'll start with the questions. And this is just getting to know you. So we're not going to be collecting any data on you here. It's just generally speaking, we want to know where everyone's from, and we're going to be using Mentimeter to do that. Great. So the first question is, where are you joining us from? What continent are you from? Are you from a particular location? If you can't use Mentimeter, feel free to put your answer in the chat box. We see a couple people from Africa, North America, and Europe. This is great. Are there any other people who want to respond? Again, if you don't feel comfortable using Mentimeter, feel free to use the chat box. So we see some people from Senegal and Africa as well. Great. I see Kenya. That's great. Thank you, guys. So the next question is really wanting to understand, what does climate resilience mean to you? So this is really going to be put in a word that really reminds you of climate resilience. What does it come up? What kind of thoughts do you have? Please feel free to put your answers in the Mentimeter or in the chat box. Yeah, that's a big one. That's quite a good one to start with. Capacity, being able to survive, adapting, yep. Being future-proof, reducing carbon footprint, sustainability, being able to cope, yep. Versatility, constant drinking supply, sustainability. Great. That's really helpful. Sustainability is coming out loud and clear. That's great to see. All right, and the next question is again a multiple choice, and we're just waiting for it to come up. Have you ever done something concretely on climate resilience in your business, funding, or advising? We're not judging, we just want to see where people are at. Okay, I see a lot of people are saying yes. Again, if you're not comfortable using Mentimeter, feel free to put it in the chat box. Seeing some people are saying, yeah, a few times you've done some work. Someone saying daily business in the chat box. Great. Okay. We have one last thing we're going to put in the Mentimeter, which is, has your SME already experienced climate-related disruptions? So have you experienced changes or problems with your operations because of climate? See, there's some yeses, there's some nos. Depending on where you are, that makes sense. If you feel like putting this in the chat box again, that's okay. Not sure? Great. We will be explaining that in a second. Frequently. Sorry to hear whoever is experiencing that frequently. All right, just wait for one more second. Occasionally, yeah. So it sounds like there have been some places where people are experiencing disruptions. It's not necessarily all the time for most people, but that people are seeing things happen in their operations affected by climate. And that's a really great place for us to start talking about climate resilience. I'm going to hand it off to Anna Marie from Aquaforall, who's going to explain a little bit about what climate resilient wash means for Aquaforall and for this climate risk assessment work.
Yes, thank you, Kim. Indeed, before going into the climate risk assessment itself, the adaptation plan, and the funding opportunity, let me first ground us a bit in what we mean by climate resilient wash. So there's many definitions out there, but basically what it all comes down to is that climate resilient wash means services that can anticipate, respond to, and adapt to climate risks over time. And it's not just about coping with shocks, but being able to recover and improve. And importantly, it still aims to deliver reliable, safe, and inclusive services, even under changing conditions. And to achieve that, we need to strengthen the resilience of the business behind those services. So because resilient services depend on resilient service providers, and enterprises are actually a key player in this. And basically you can look at this from two perspectives. So first, on the one hand, wash businesses create resilience for others through the services they provide. For example, ensuring water access during droughts, or managing sanitation safely during floods. So this really is the impact side on how your business helps communities cope with climate change. And then at the right, at the same time, you see that your own operations, or at least operations of wash service providers, are exposed to climate risks. So things like infrastructure damage or water scarcity or higher operating costs. So you also need to make your own model more resilient. Overall, what we consider climate resilience in WASH to be is that it's really strengthening the business and delivering resilient services. And what we think is good to realize is that understanding climate risks and taking practical action to address them is also very useful for accessing climate finance, as it shows investors that your business is prepared, resilient, and ready for funding. So it's also actually a climate finance opportunity for those enterprises that are looking into this. So let's make this a bit more concrete by looking at two examples of enterprises that Aquaforall has supported through different accelerator programs in the past, because then this really shows how different climate risks translate into practical actions. So first, we have Irisol as an example, which is a piped water supply company in Uganda. Maybe they are actually joining the webinar, I don't know. But in this case, the main risk identified was frequent river flooding, which leads to damaged boreholes, but also disrupted the water supply, which, of course, as you can imagine, have huge impacts on the communities. So the adaptation actions focused on strengthening the infrastructure and preparedness. So one example was increasing the water storage to ensure the continuity of the supply. But also an alternative response could have been to solidify the boreholes, including measures to raise the access to the borehole, for example, to prevent contamination by flooding. And the adaptation activities furthermore also included training of staff to design and manage the flood resilient systems, but also working with communities on flood preparedness. Here really resilience is about protecting the assets and ensuring service continuity during shocks. And then another example of an enterprise that we supported is Sibtu Distribution Services, a safe water enterprise, in Burkina Faso. And in this case, the key challenge identified was the decreasing rainfall. So which of course leads to falling groundwater levels, and that directly affected the business model. So the adaptation actions that were put forward were to reduce the dependency on a single water source, for example, to invest in rainwater harvesting, but also to promote responsible water use among customers. So here, resilience is about diversifying water sources and managing demand. So together, we think these examples show that climate risks differ. They can be very variable, but the response is always practical and tailored. And importantly, these actions strengthen both service delivery and the business itself. Let me go to the funding opportunity now. So as was mentioned by Sarah, we have a funding opportunity available. So let me walk you through how you can access support and funding for climate resilience under this program. We structured this as a step-by-step process. So first, a few key eligibility criteria. So the first one is that it should be focused on WASH SMEs with at least 3 years of operations. And importantly, businesses that provide, at least for the majority of their activities, water or sanitation services in a commercial or market-based way. And at this stage, funding is available in a number of countries, mainly in West Africa, but also Ethiopia. And once eligible, the process consists of 3 main steps. We go there. So first is assessment and support. So we support you in understanding your climate risk and emissions. This includes technical assistance, help translate climate risk into business implications. And importantly, we also provide support in designing practical adaptation activities. And then based on that, which is the second step, you can apply for funding with a clear risk assessment, an adaptation plan, and a budget. And Kimberly Worsham from Flush and also my colleague Simon Cohen will elaborate on that a bit more later on. But basically to say that adaptation activities can be both technical and non-technical. So it can be, for example, improving infrastructure or service design, but it can also be working with customers on water use. And typically the support is in the range of 10 to 30,000 US dollars, depending on the proposed activities and also whether it only includes TA or also implementation funding. And overall, we expect to be able to support 4 to 6 enterprises under this specific program. And then the step 3 is finally the most important part, which is implementation and monitoring. So we support execution of the activities and track results together. So this helps generate evidence, which is also useful for fundraising, but also to scale your operations. So basically, we support the full journey from understanding risks to implementing solutions. Let me also give some insight in the potential types of funded support. So what you can think of in terms of the funding support is along the following dimensions. So first, it's operational, which can be linked to, for example, water supply risks, but also flooding risks or water quality risks. And to respond to this is, for example, by adjusting infrastructure. Or it can be adapting your business model, for example, adjusting tariffs or diversifying revenue, developing climate resilient CAPEX plans, or of course, using the climate risk assessments in investor communication. Another area that you can think of is governance, for example, developing risk monitoring dashboards or training staff on climate risk and response. And then there's service delivery, which could translate into, for example, promoting water efficiency among customers, or offering climate resilient sanitation solutions. For example, raised latrines or sealed pits. Another category, the fifth on the slide, is data and tools. So conducting periodic climate risk assessments, not one-off, but actually periodic, is a strong move, as well as setting KPIs linked to resilience, for example, uptime or water losses or cost recovery under stress. And then lastly, there's partnership, for example, working with technical experts or collaborating with research institutions or climate experts. Or, for example, exploring climate finance as an opportunity. And this translates into practical activities like continuity planning, staff training, customer awareness, or infrastructure upgrades and studies. So basically, there's a whole lot possible. Basically summarizing that it can be technical and non-technical, always tailored to your needs. That was it from my end. I'd like to hand over back again to Kim.
Thanks, Annemarie. So we've talked a lot about climate risk and climate resilience, but how and why would we actually calculate this? So let's first talk about what is a climate risk assessment. So when we talk about resilience, it's really about learning how to adapt to climate, but to adapt to climate-related incidences, we need to assess where the risks are. So what we've done is figured out how to develop a tool with Aquaforall on a list of questions to help assess those risks and identify where your biggest vulnerabilities can be so that we can create adaptation from that. So on the right-hand side, you see a screenshot of an mWater tool that Simon will be talking about in more detail after I talk. But that is really what we're looking at, is creating this assessment so that we can get to adaptation planning, so that we can get to that funding for climate resilience. To the next slide. So when we talk about climate risks, there is a generally agreed upon formula in the corporate world, in the global climate world, about how we calculate this. So what it is climate risks is equivalent to hazard likelihood times impact. So what does that mean? So hazard likelihood is really about what are the actual likelihood of events like flooding or drought happening within a period of time, often between 5 to 10 years. And then impact is about what is it actually doing to your operations or to your services negatively. So trying to understand if there's a severity level in the impact, and that is what's going to amount to your risk. And from that, we have a 4-step process to get to completing that formula. And really what it is about looking at that local landscape, defining what those hazards are, assessing that impact or your vulnerability, and then prioritizing. On to the next slide. So when it comes to what hazards are, we often call them hazards at Aquaforall, and they look like floods, they look like storms, they can look like wildfires or landslides or even earthquakes. And just as a side note, click the button again. There should be a little note that shops up. Yep. While some of these events that are climate hazards are something that you see immediately, like a flood or an earthquake, some of these, such as water scarcity or water quality issues, have longer term effects that do affect your operations and do require adaptation as well. We do see that events related to climate that affect your operations are often several of these things. So it's about learning how to prioritize this list, and there could be others on this list as well, and figuring out which ones are most likely to happen so that you can learn how to adapt to them. We do think that there are some good resources out there to understand which hazards are the most if you most relevant to your local context. We like think hazard as a good option because it does have a more local approach and understanding which natural related events can occur in your region. On to the next slide. So once we know what could affect operations, we need to understand how it affects it across 5 different aspects. And those aspects in your operations are around the environment, your social aspects, the technical, institutional, and financial. So for example, for social, how does it change your actual market? Does the supply or the demand change? And we have a 5-step scoring process to help you learn how to prioritize these impacts and figure out which ones are the most critical to your company or your SME. So, for example, maybe you don't have insurance and that's the most problematic thing for you because if something happens, it really means that you can't recover. Or maybe there's an infrastructural related challenge with flooding that is a technical problem that you need to remember. On to the next slide. So as an example, let's say that somebody is assessing their company or their SME, and they've decided that flooding is the most significant hazard. And so what they've done is look at these 5 different aspects of risk impact and said, okay, so environmental, we're on a floodplain. So if there's flooding, it's going to flood our operations. Socially, and maybe that's a very high threat for them. That's a very high impact. Whereas social, maybe they don't have a lot of low to middle income community members nearby. So that's not really a big impact, but it's something they wanted to note. Technical, maybe there's a low threat in vehicle fleets getting flooded or not being able to move. Maybe that's because they've already got aquatic cars or something like that. Maybe they're already aware of it. Institutional, maybe there's no warning sign or warning system from the government. So that's a high threat or a high impact because they can't plan quickly enough or they can't adjust quickly enough. They have to really go with if there's flooding, it's happening. And lastly, maybe there's some financial impact because they don't have that insurance for flooding, and that is a moderate impact. Now, I've just talked about a lot of stuff. What we want to kind of figure out now is where you feel like the hazards and impacts are related most to your SMEs. So on to the next slide, we're going to use Mentimeter again. If you want to use the chat box, please use the chat box as well. So the first question is about what are your biggest climate hazards for your operations? Now, this doesn't mean that it won't change right now, but based on what you know, what climate hazards do you think pose the greatest risk? If you want to use the chat box to answer that as well, that's okay. Okay, I see flooding, I see water scarcity, so drought is coming up a little bit. Okay, I see some others. Water security, so water scarcity is a challenge. Water quality, lots of flooding concerns. That makes sense if you live on a coastal place, especially floods. Yep. So for a lot of places, flooding and water scarcity might be your 2 priority hazards to consider for your impact. Extreme heat. Yep, that makes sense. Just waiting a little longer. I see people are thinking. Any other hazards people know that they're experiencing right now or think might be an issue for them? Water scarcity and flooding, water quality, yep. And some of these might be connected, right? If you have a water quality issue, often that means you have a water security issues as well. Some others. The next Mentimeter question we're going to ask is, which impact decision is most relevant to your enterprise for your climate hazards? So what we're asking here is, where are you most concerned about climate hazards impacting your SME? Again, feel free to use the chat box. Oh, okay. Feel free to use the chat box. Feel free to use the Mentimeter as well. I see financial. People are concerned about the finances. Yep, technical just shot up. Financial, that makes sense. It's hard to financially recover when big climate hazards happen. Revenue, yep. So maybe that's also a social issue. Can you actually get people to pay you for your services during a hazard? Technical, makes sense. Just wait a few more seconds. Financial and technical. Yep. And it makes sense that there could be several. Access, so maybe there's a social piece there or an environmental piece. Yep. And I'm seeing people kind of already starting to prioritize in the chat box which ones are the biggest challenges for them that they need to work on adaptations. Good stuff. So we've just talked a little bit about climate risk. What does that look like? What does it mean for Aqua for All? How do we actually adapt to that? And then how do we actually assess climate risks, which was this monitoring tool that we've been talking about, but what does that actually look like? How do you use it? I'm going to pass this on to Simon Cohen, who's going to be walking through the tool that Aqua for All has created, and we're going to be using as the starting step for looking for people to fund or SMEs to fund for this climate adaptation. On to Simon.
Thank you very much, Tim, and hello everybody. I'm Simon Cohen. I'm the WASH expert at Aqua for All. I'm going to take the next 15 minutes to walk you through the climate risk assessment survey. We've developed it on the tool called mWater. I should mention we have zero affiliation with mWater. We just think it's a very good tool to use, and we understand that many people on the call already will know mWater, so hopefully it'll be pretty straightforward to know how to use this tool. Okay, so I'll just walk you through it now. So we've developed a survey, and you can fill in the survey in two different ways. So the option one is to fill it in through the web link that's on your screen. You can also use a QR code on your phone. And that will just take you directly to the survey where you can fill it in. The second option, which actually has a little bit more functionality, so I would definitely suggest using this if you already use mWater, is through the mWater app. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. You can access the survey through the app, and you just need this access code that I'll show you how to use, which is the code is 57052858. So take a note of that. I could also note that once the survey is opened, I'll open one now just to show you. You can select the language in French or English. Can you see the survey on the screen now or not? Yes. Okay, good, because I'm seeing the slides still. So glad that you can see the survey, which is in French or English, and you just select French or English at the top. Right, so this is the web link. So if you click on the option one, just go straight into the survey, the web link, you will see this, and then you fill in your details here. One of the issues is that you can't save it as a draft and then fill it in several different time periods. You have to fill it in all in one go. If you're already using mWater, and you can just go onto the app and find the survey by joining the organization, the Climate Risk Assessment Organization. If you've not got an account, you can create an account here by the way, I should have also mentioned that the link to the app is in the website, in the slides, so you can find that too. You can just create an account and fill in your details. Once you've got signed in, then you can join the Climate Risk Assessment Organization by just pressing the configuration button here at the top and then enter the code that's in the PowerPoint slide, which is this, and then join group. I get a pop-up saying I'm already in the group, so I can't join it again. And then once you've joined it, you just click standard user. And then I'm going to walk you through how to fill in the survey. You can click on surveys here. Let's just do that. And at the top, you just press start a survey. And if you've joined the group, you will see, you won't see all of these, you will see the climate risk assessment survey, plus maybe others that you're already used to filling in if you already use mWater. So you just click on the climate risk assessment survey, and then it takes you to the questions. As you can see, it's exactly the same survey as the link. So if you do not want to download or join mWater, no problem. Just go to the link and fill it in. I'm going to go back to the app, exactly the same thing. And it tells you how to fill in the survey here. I'll walk you through a little bit. I won't do it all because it'll probably take a couple of hours to fill in. I should also mention that we understand that most people are going to be filling this in because of the opportunity for funding. But we really believe that the completion of the climate risk assessment will be helpful in itself to help identify what climate risks are most important to you and potentially how to adapt to them. But let's get started. Let's just go through the survey and see how to do it. So you first enter your enterprise name. Let's just say I'm going to make one up now. Simon's Water Kiosk. My name, Simon Cohen. My email address, say simon@waterkiosks.org. The sector I work in, so it's a drop-down box. Water kiosk would be sector. If you work across multiple sectors, just choose your main one. Subsector, water kiosks, obviously is water kiosks. Your location of operations, let's say I work in West Africa in Ghana, and then select the GPS of your operation. You can do this in different ways. You can click on the current location if you're sitting next to where you work or where your operations are. You can use a map and select it by zooming in on the map. Or you could also click on, if you know the GPS coordinates, you can click on advanced. If you don't know, you can just press don't know, and that's fine too. So once you've done that, the first few questions, it's going to take you to the actual part of the survey, which is identifying the climate hazards. Remember, as Kim was saying, there's a two-part system to the climate risk assessment. First is identifying the likelihood of a hazard, not the consequence of the hazard, but the likelihood of the following hazards happening. And you can select from this drop down here. So on the Mentimeter, most people said floods with very high water availability. I'm going to say water availability is a big concern for me. Water quality, I'm going to say that's not important. Storms, not important, very low, low, and others, very low. You select which hazard you think is the highest. You can select several, you can select one, whatever you think is relevant for you. You can also, as Kim mentioned, we like the tool Think Hazard. The tool Think Hazard helps you to identify hazards as well. We should use our own intuition, but if we want some support, you can use this tool called Think Hazard. If you click on this link here, it goes to Think Hazard, and then it helps. So say I'm in Accra, Ghana, and then it will tell you. So in Accra, Think Hazard says floods are the highest. A wildfire is important as well, or a risk. So that kind of helps you to identify other potential hazards that maybe you've not thought about. Let's go back to the tool. So again, we've selected what hazards are most important for us right now. That's floods and water availability. And now it's going to ask you, why have you selected those two hazards? So first of all, please detail the reasons, and hopefully the survey is quite intuitive, of why you selected very high likelihood of flood occurring. And you can say, well, over the past 10 years, floods are becoming more frequent and severe, and just things like that. So it's about include the frequency, the duration, and how it might change in the future. So you do that for each of the hazards that you have scored very high or medium, sorry. So if you scored the hazard of low or very low, it won't ask you any more follow-up questions. So now that we have identified our hazard, we need to look at the impact if that hazard occurs. So to do that, we click next and we go on to the impacts. So again, at the top, it gives them some instructions. But because I clicked flood as one of my hazards, it will now ask me about the impact of floods. And so it says, the first section, we said that the flood likelihood of flood occurring is very high. And each of the following questions, if a flood were to occur, select the impact on your operations as no impact, low impact, medium impact, high impact, or very high, and explain why in the comments. And a reminder that the impact is both considering exposure, how much of the water service will be affected, and also the vulnerability, how susceptible the exposed services are to the damage and disruption. And then, as Kim introduced earlier as well, it goes through the different options, the different parts of the impact. You've got technical impact, environmental impact, social impact, and financial impact. I'll just do a very quick example. So the first technical one, it says infrastructure damage or malfunction. And then you choose your scale. So if I'm going to say the chance of flood damaging my infrastructure is very high, and in the comment section, write why you think it's going to be high. So the flooding will damage the pump. I'm just making something up, probably not the best example, but I hope you get the idea. Put the impact and then the justification in the comment section underneath. And once we've done the flood section, it will ask you, well, at the bottom, if there's something else that has not been covered, you can add it here by just pressing add. You can add as many other impacts as you like. Now we've done the flooding section, it will ask you to do the water availability section, because that's the second most important impact that we selected, sorry, most important hazard that we selected. And then the same thing for the water availability impact. I won't do that now. Click on next, and then it will, final section is about your adaptive capacity at the moment. So do you have insurance? Do you have internal procedures or contingency plans? Do you have access to early warning systems? Is institutional support available to you? These are just yes or no questions, but again, please do put some comments in there. And the final two questions are details of the current climate adaptation measures, if any, that you are undertaking. So what are and how effective are your current adaptation measures, including infrastructure protections, maintaining water quality during hazards, maintaining service continuity, reducing financial risks, etc. And then last section is just to get started, but what do you think would be a good adaptation for you? So let's just say flood defenses. And then you can add many as you like and put a little bit of an explanation in there. And once you've finished, you can press submit. If you decide that you want to save it and come back to it because you haven't filled it in as much detail as you wanted to, you can just click Save for Later. I'll just do that now. If you save for later, it's useful to give a draft, a name, so plant risk assessment draft, or what's the assignment kiosk, right? Simon's kiosks. And then you can press Save. Reminder that this is only available if you use the app. If you use a link, which are perfectly fine, you can't do it in more than one sitting. You have to do it all together at the same time. But if you use the app, you can find your draft surveys in the app. If you go to the home page, the second icon here, the little clipboard, is where your draft surveys are and where your completed surveys are. So after you submit it, let's go back, open it up, and go next, and then finally we can submit. This survey has been successfully submitted, and we will find it in our recently completed surveys. You can also open it again and edit it if you've submitted it as well. So 2 ways you can submit that, save it for later. Right, I'm aware I shouldn't take too much longer, but I'm going to just quickly show you what happens next with the results. I'll go back to the slideshow. And then we've gone through how you complete the survey. Next is how the results are displayed. So there is a dashboard that we've created. The QR code is there and the link is here, which displays your high level, your results of the survey. I'll open it up now. Let's go to the dashboard. If you follow that link, you'll get to this dashboard. And then this is again just a very high level overview of what the key hazards are and impacts are for your organization. You use the dashboard by selecting your enterprise here. I did an example one earlier called Simon's Water Trucking Business. If I select it, it will then filter this dashboard to your results. I could note that this information is available to anyone that has the link to the dashboard. So we've not used, so the information here is not too sensitive. But if you have any issues of your information being displayed to others, then let us know and then we can sort something out separately. First of all, you will see just some information, the sector you work in, the subsector, the location. You have a map here on the right-hand side. Might be useful if you want to zoom out, maybe there's some rivers or things that you don't know about, so you can look at the map and see if there's anything relevant for the climate investigations there, or climate risk assessments there. If you want to find out more information about your survey, you can click on the point of the map and it will give you all the information that you filled in. I will note now that this is only available for your own organization. So if you click on that link, little icon here, doc, for someone else's survey, you won't be able to see it. It's only available to yourself, so that your data is protected. What is shared is this table. And this table is just an overview of what your main hazards are, what the highest impacts are, and then finally what the risk rating is. As Tim mentioned before, climate risk is calculated by likelihood, the chance of the flood occurring, and multiplied by the impact. And then this table here, obviously color coded. In this example, I said flood and water quality were my highest climate hazards. And then it goes through each of the different impacts, technical, environmental, social, and financial, and color codes it with a traffic light system on what are the highest. And at the end, it gives the overall hazard risk rating. So you can see here, flood is the highest risk. So if we were to prioritize something, we would probably prioritize working on adaptations to flood. It's important also, though, not to forget or neglect any impact here that has very high. It's still worth investigating anything that can be done to reduce, especially the very high impacts that were identified during the survey. Right, I think I've spent enough time going through that. I hope it was clear enough. I should also mention that Kim and the team will be doing a walking session, so at some point in the future, for you to be able to ask some questions if you have any on how to fill in the survey and the next steps. Thank you. I'll pass back to Sarah, I believe.
Thanks so much, Simon. Yeah, that is yeah, we went from a little bit more high level to incredibly practical with the climate risk assessment. I hope you guys were able to follow along okay. And yeah, like we said, there's going to also be some opportunities to ask questions to us and to the Flush team if you need support. But next we have one last Mentimeter. And the question is, yeah, in one word, how do you feel about the climate risk assessment tool? Yeah, I will let everyone maybe think about it and add your reflection or feedback there. And again, you can also use the chat. And maybe you need a moment to get back into Mentimeter after some time. Oh, nice. Yeah. Clear and helpful. Thank you. Adequate. Yeah, it's okay also if the answer is a bit confusing. It's quite a lot of new information perhaps. But yeah, glad to think that you hear that you think it's practical and informative as well. Yeah, great.
Spot on.
Spot on, yeah. Need some practice. Yeah. Also very makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, thanks so much for giving your feedback. I see a few things still coming in. But so we have some time for questions. I'm going to move to the next steps. So for those of you who are interested, well, let's start at the top. Everyone can fill in a climate risk assessment. If you're an enterprise and you're interested in filling it in, thinking about it, and well, seeing what the results are for yourself, please feel free to fill it in. If you are an enterprise who is meeting our eligibility criteria in the focus countries that we mentioned earlier, and you're interested in in potentially receiving some technical assistance or grant support from Aqua for All, these are the next steps about yeah, the timeline, what's coming next. So first we have this webinar. The climate risk assessment tool has been opened. We are going to share with you, like I said, this webinar recording, the links, everything like that, so you can access the instructions and the climate risk assessment. And the deadline to submit the CRAs is June 30th. So you have until the end of this month to submit the CRAs. On the 16th of June, Flush is going to organize in English and in French walk-in sessions where they're going to keep an open slot, and anybody who's interested to come to the session and learn a bit more is welcome. They can answer any of your questions. If these dates don't work for you and they don't work for anybody, we can move them. Please reach out to us if you're really interested in getting some support and this doesn't work for you. You can also email us. I'll put an email later in the slides if you have any specific questions. We're always open. In July, Flush is going to support in the reviewing of the CRAs, and we are going to move into the second phases, which is developing an adaptation plan, submitting it for approval, and then actually designing support packages for enterprises. So yeah, the first steps, of course, are submitting the climate risk assessment, and then everything else will follow. Here are some key links. Maybe you can take a screenshot, or these will be, like I said, shared. On our website, aquaforall.org, there is a news item about this opportunity. It will also be shared on our LinkedIn in the coming days, so you can keep your eye out for that. This is already the link to the news article, which will list all this information. It will also have all the links in there as well. Those are the two links that Simon shared again for you. The deadline, which is very important, the 30th of June, and then our email at Aqua for All, which is the programs at Aqua for All. And please reach out there if there are any questions. Lastly, we have a few additional resources for you. We won't go through this too much because I know we have just 4 minutes left for Q&A, but these are a few guides that we have. Yeah, I actually won't go into this too much because I want to give someone an opportunity to ask questions if there are any. From the chat, yeah, so please can ESOs also apply to provide technical support? It's a good question. Thank you. So we will, of course, first have to go through the process of doing the assessments. Based on the needs, we will also then source service providers who are interested in providing those services or who are relevant. If you are a service provider, a TA provider, you can also send us an email. We can register your interest and potentially reach out to you. And Anna Marie, as our TA manager, will be able to facilitate that. Yes. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Well, there's one in French.
The question in French is about it's an investment firm in Côte d'Ivoire that wants to know if there's any collaboration with Aqua for All.
Yeah, for this program, Côte d'Ivoire is an eligible country, but then we would be more looking for water and sanitation enterprises. So also, if you have specific cases and you're interested on a kind of one-on-one basis, you can also, again, email the programs at Aqua for All email, and we can respond to you directly. And I see someone's hand is up. I don't know if you have a question or not, Elma.
Yes, I have a clarification. Thanks.
Yeah.
And thanks to the Flash team for the useful tool. My question is on the overall, did you call it the overall rating? I'm interested to know whether you apply any weights. I must have missed this. How do you calculate from the environmental, social, financial, and the rest to have the overall rating? It comes, I'd assume it comes automatically. Do you apply any rates, any weights, and how do you get to that overall rating for a particular farm based on each category that you have classified, whether of the risk, whether it is floods, whether it is drought, or wherever?
Yeah, thanks, Elma. Good question. I know you didn't miss it. I didn't go into too many details over the weighted scores. We actually have just taken an average. So each criteria is weighted the same, and then the final hazard score is calculated by the likelihood, so 1 to 5, multiplied by the average of all of the impact scores. And so the scoring will come between 1 to 5. Total 1 to 5 is very low. 5 to 10 is low. 10 to 15 is medium, etc., etc.
Okay. So with interactions on how climate change affects different populations in a myriad of ways, I would imagine at some point, maybe given a typical country, let's say like Kenya. Kenya has like 47 counties, and flooding would affect a county in the western part of Kenya quite differently as it would with a county in the central part of Kenya. So there's a bit more of contextualities in how this comes along, and perhaps maybe as a way of and also it depends on who is responding. So my comment or suggestions will be also to review, because I know they are going to send their inputs on the CRA, reviewing it based on the context upon which the data is coming in, so that we objectify the overall ranking of every other enterprise reporting.
Yeah, fair enough. And another good point. I didn't explain that either, but in the survey, it mentions that if you are operating in different areas, it's advisable to submit a separate survey for each area that you operate in. Don't want to make it too tedious for everyone, but as you said, if the climate conditions are a lot different in the different areas you work in, then it's advisable to submit different surveys.
Yeah, thanks so much, Simon. Yeah, unfortunately, we are at the time, so there's not any more time for any more questions. I'm very sorry about that. But yeah, we want to thank you guys so much. Maybe just one last comment is that in the course of this program, this tool is it is a tool for you to think about the different hazards and to get a sort of a sense of where the priorities might need to be. And then there will also be support from the Flush team, from Aqua for All, to dive into that further, maybe contextualize it locally a little bit more, think about really how you prioritize it. So we hope it's just a starting point, but I think a lot of great suggestions, and there's a lot of people thinking about how to make the best tools available, which I think is great. So yeah, with that, I just want to thank you for joining our webinar. I hope it was informative, and yeah, we hope that some people are ready to submit risk assessments after this. Awesome.
And of course, any other questions, remaining questions or comments, please feel free to approach us through email. That would be very welcome.
Yes. Yeah, please reach out. Okay, we are going to wrap up and close the webinar now. So thank you so much.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.